The winter of 1909 was not kind to the outposts scattered across the endless white near Nome, Alaska. In those days, the snow fell without end, swallowing the horizon in a hush so complete it seemed the world itself had fallen silent. The military weather station, perched 30 miles from the nearest cluster of lights, stood like a battered island in the blizzard's unrelenting sea. Its 3 occupants, Frank Dalloway, Harold Greaves, and a third whose name never made the reports, were accustomed to solitude, to cold so deep it numbed the thoughts before it claimed the fingers. Inside the outpost, beside the crackle of a battered radio and the hum of battered heaters, the nights were spent in watchful quiet. Conversations drifted to whispers as hours dragged, punctuated only by the howl of wind and the staccato tap of ice against the shuttered windows. They sometimes joked to break the monotony, inventing stories of creatures and ghosts wandering the Eskimo night. But most of the time, they did what soldiers always do in the waiting hours. Kept busy, kept quiet, kept staring at the clock, until the 3rd night. When the wind shrieked loudest and the stove's heat barely clung to the frigid air, an unnatural stillness pressed upon the outpost. It was then, when even the storm seemed to hold its breath, that the front door creaked slowly open. No one knocked. No footsteps approached. The thick layer of snow outside had muffled everything, yet the door, solid, heavy, stubborn, yawned inward of its own accord. Frank Dalloway was the first to react. A technician by trade, calm under stress, Frank tightened his coat and stepped out into the chaos of swirling snow. He vanished for 3, maybe 4 minutes. His footprints vanished almost faster than he made them. When he returned, everyone saw immediately that something had changed. His eyes, once quick with banter, now stared vacant and empty. His lips moved over words he would never again speak. He retired from his post that spring, never uttering another syllable as long as he lived. Not to doctors, not to his wife, not even to himself. The records kept by Harold Greaves, station chief, tried to make sense of that night. His logs were meticulous, a running tally of supplies, wind speeds, health checks, daily thoughts. But on a page marked Incident 3:12 a.m., one entry was scratched out so violently the ink was scored deep into the paper. Years later, when catalogers returned and swept the pages beneath blacklight, a single line crawled from beneath the erasure. She doesn't knock, she waits until you look. And soon, that was all Greaves would write of the woman in white. As winter stretched on, the figure began to show herself. Soldiers on patrol reported, first in hushed disbelief, then in growing fear, that a woman stood in the snow a distance from the outpost, just under the reach of the spotlights. Always pale, uncannily so, draped in a gown that hung limp but immaculate against the biting wind. No shoes to be seen, no shiver despite the cold, no billowing plume of breath in the sub-zero darkness. Each night, the reports read, she would move just a little closer, never advancing in sight, never moving with human speed or trust. But every sundown brought her nearer, step by step, until one night she stood almost at the threshold, visible only if you dared look straight through the window. Men stationed at the outpost would take longer and longer shifts inside, refusing to answer any call to the door after sunset. Radios crackled with whispers that the woman had appeared again tonight, or that someone had seen her whisper-thin outline reflected in the glass of the mess hall window. Wind or paranoia began to keep everyone on edge. Those that did speak of her began to lower their voices, as if even her name might serve as an invitation. But the military kept their own secrets. Stations across Alaska, from remote listening posts to central records offices, filled folders with incident reports marked in thick, alarming red. Do not acknowledge her. By 1972, as the years passed and public interest in military activity faded, a historian named Lydia Keene petitioned for access to the old weather station records. Sifting through brittle yellowed papers, she found a single bundle labeled Project Echo, Entity Observation, Classified. The rest was routine. Weather logs, maintenance requests, field interviews. But in this single file, one line stood out like a wound on clean paper. Subject appears to manipulate ambient temperature. Communication impossible. Recommendation, do not acknowledge her presence. The orders were not to talk, not to look, not to open the door for her, not under any circumstance. They had not only seen her, they had tried and failed to understand her. What they found terrified them more than ignorance ever could. As the decades unfurled, the legend of the snow ghost moved out of classified files and into the dark corners of Nome's collective memory. Locals would nod grimly towards the icebound wastes and share whispered warnings to newcomers. Stories stretched, details twisted with each retelling, but one detail never changed. Over 30 people, from trappers to scientists to seasoned explorers, vanished without a trace between 1940 and 2003 in the area surrounding Nome. Rescue teams found empty campsites, abandoned trucks, frozen supplies. No tracks led in or out. Sometimes, the tents were zipped tight from the inside, as if their owners had simply faded out of existence. The one connecting thread? Each missing person, in the days or weeks before their disappearance, had confided to someone that they'd seen something out in the snow. A white figure, neither living nor dead, waiting just beyond the touch of the wind. Most just called her the snow ghost. The braver among them refused to say anything at all. In the silence left behind, fear grew like frost on a shadowed window. Then came the new century, bringing with it the omnipresent lens of internet cameras and online fame. In the spring of 2019, an adventure YouTuber named Ben Travers set out to document his latest challenge, camping solo among the vast, endless white near Nome, braving a night alone in some of the most forbidding terrain on the continent. Ben's final video begins, as many others do, with laughter and the click of camera gear. The aurora flickers above, casting ghost lights across the snow. He speaks cheerfully to his audience about the cold, about the stars, about the old ghost stories the locals had warned him of. None of them, he scoffs, could intimidate a man born for adventure. The footage is uneventful for nearly 12 minutes. The crackle of the camp stove, the snowflakes tangling around the tent, Ben's steady narration on the cold and the beauty and the solitude. Minutes tick by. Then at 11:32, the camera pans to the tent flap as Ben notices movement outside. Through the plastic, just visible in swirling snow, stands a female figure. White gown, barefoot, impossibly still. Her face is obscured, hidden by the way snow curves around her, distorting her features into something utterly alien. Ben's tone wavers for the first time, a forced laugh bubbling up as he calls out, "We've got a visitor." He shuffles toward the zipper, knuckles white around the tent door. The feed cuts out. No more laughter, no more commentary. Searchers arrive the next day. They found the tent perfectly upright, zipped tight, with Ben's gear still inside. His camera rested untouched, pointed at the door. Batteries drained, except for the few seconds of corrupted, static-filled file that ended with Ben's nervous voice and the indistinct hiss of wind. There were no tracks, no prints from boots or bare skin. Nothing to show where Ben might have gone. No trail, no evidence. Just a vanished man and the memory left behind by the camera's unblinking eye. For the people of Nome, the message was as clear as ever. If you see her, you will be tempted to look. If you look, you will remember fear. If you dare speak, you will learn what it is to be truly alone. Because she never knocks. She only waits for you to let her in. Stories continue to circulate in the bars, in the general stores, in the close-knit cabins that dot the region. Mothers caution their children, and old men lean in close beside wood stoves late at night, voices trembling as they repeat the ancient warning. If you see her through the window, don't open the door, don't blink, don't speak, because she never knocks. She only waits for you to let her in. So now you know the legend whispered in the shadow of Alaska's endless snows. The tale of the woman in white, who feels no cold, who leaves no prints, who has patience beyond human understanding. Some say she's a spirit, a nameless phantom born of grief and frost. Others claim she's something older, something that predates all memory or myth. The files exist, red-stamped and buried deep in military archives, hinting at truths that civilization would prefer to keep locked away with the permafrost. If, on a lonely winter's night, you look up and see a flash of white outside your window, will you remember these rules? Will you resist the urge to answer the knock that never comes? Will you have the strength not to speak her name? And ask yourself, would you open the door if you saw her standing there, motionless and silent, Waiting for an invitation you didn't mean to give? If this story sent shivers down your spine, make sure you let it be known. Share your thoughts, but remember, some secrets are better left in the snow. For those brave enough to comment, say, "I will never open the door." If you still have the courage to close your eyes tonight, you're already stronger than most. And most importantly, hold fast to the rules, as the men of that outpost once did, as the missing might have wished they had. Subscribe for more tales pulled from the dark and frozen places the world meant to forget, because some doors once opened can never be closed again.